The stars above Alderaan had never seemed so alien. T'Challa's arrival had been anything but subtle. One moment he was in the heart of Wakanda, overseeing vibranium experiments on a hidden plateau, and the next he was falling through an impossibly cold void, the air unfamiliar, and the gravity subtly off. The portal had cracked open above him in a shiver of cosmic energy, vibrating through the bones of his body and testing the limits of his vibranium-enhanced physiology. He landed with a controlled roll atop a high ridge, the ground beneath him firm but slightly metallic in texture, a subtle hum of energy threading through the rocks. His suit absorbed the impact, dispersing kinetic energy, but the sensation of displacement, the sudden relocation from one universe to another, left him briefly disoriented. Around him, the landscape stretched like a dreamscape, a delicate blend of verdant plains, glimmering lakes, and towering cities. Alderaan was alive in a way that Wakanda had never been. The air smelled faintly of ozone and the distant tang of energy fields, a galaxy's unique blend of atmospherics that spoke of both advanced technology and natural beauty. He could feel it, an undercurrent in the force that pulsed through this world. It was subtle, at first almost imperceptible, like the soft resonance of a distant drum. But even as an outsider, he could sense that this was no ordinary world, and that the serenity he saw was fragile, perched atop political and cosmic balances that could shatter at any misstep. He rose, scanning the horizon with enhanced vision. His suit's vibranium panels shimmered softly, calibrating to the ambient energy. Yet even at 90% efficiency, the dimensional interference had destabilized the suit's kinetic absorption slightly. He was more than capable of defending himself against ordinary threats. Yet he was acutely aware that this world operated under rules unfamiliar to him. The Force, that invisible web threading all life, resonated differently here. He could feel the potential for danger, not only in physical threats, but in currents of power that were entirely alien. It didn't take long for him to attract attention. High above the ridge, 3 sleek, triangular craft descended slowly, their engines humming with a precision that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Alderaanian patrol ships, or something approximating it, he realized instinctively. As they landed, uniformed guards emerged, their blasters raised and their expressions taut with suspicion. T'Challa raised his hands slowly, his posture open, projecting authority without aggression. "I mean no harm," he said, his voice calm but resonant, the vibranium suit subtly amplifying it. "I am not from here." The guards hesitated, exchanging glances. One stepped forward, a tall man with a silver insignia across his chest. "Identify yourself. How did you arrive above our planet without clearance?" T'Challa's lips pressed into a thin line. "I do not know. I was experimenting in my homeworld. And then, this," he gestured vaguely at the fading ripple in the sky, "happened. I am called T'Challa, the Black Panther, protector of my people." The guards tensed further, though not out of fear but uncertainty. The name meant nothing here, but his presence, his aura of strength and control, was unmistakable. There was power in him, raw and disciplined, a warrior used to leading and defending. The lead guard signaled cautiously, lowering his blaster slightly, though every motion remained cautious. Before words could be exchanged further, the Force stirred. A subtle tremor beneath the ridge, a whisper of energy that tugged at T'Challa's instincts. He crouched, scanning the terrain. Blaster fire erupted in the distance, accompanied by the subtle vibration of energy signatures, unlike any technology he had ever encountered. Civilians screamed, scattering toward the safety of nearby structures. Alderaan cities were technologically advanced, but unprepared for sudden, unseen assault. Something, or someone, was targeting them, and he could feel the danger threading through the very air. T'Challa didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the chaos, each stride powered by enhanced strength and agility, the vibranium suit absorbing impacts as debris and energy shards rained down around him. Civilians were his first priority. He lifted falling beams with a single hand, redirected collapsing structures, and guided panicked families to safety. His movements were fluid, calculated, each one a perfect balance of protection and offense, the training of decades manifesting in instinctive action. Even as he saved lives, he could sense multiple presences moving within the city. Shadowy figures cloaked not in ordinary armor, but in the subtle energy of the Force. He had never encountered such beings, yet his mind, honed in both combat and leadership, began to adapt. That he could anticipate their strikes, sense their intent, and counter with a combination of martial skill and technology. His vibranium claws cut through mechanical traps with precision. His suit's kinetic absorption allowed him to block energy blasts with minimal effort. But the Force-sensitive attackers were different. They moved unpredictably, striking from angles he could not entirely see, bending the environment to their will. A voice called from above, deep and calm, resonating through the street and street-side structures alike. "We mean no permanent harm. Stand down, stranger." T'Challa's gaze swept upward, spotting a figure levitating several meters above the street. Robes flowing, hands raised, eyes narrowed in scrutiny, the figure radiated authority and power. The Force here was strong, stronger than T'Challa had anticipated. He recognized it instinctively, the energy signature distinct, resonant in a way he had never felt. "I am T'Challa," he said, inclining his head respectfully. "I come without intent to harm, but this city is under attack, and I cannot stand by." The figure nodded slowly, eyes piercing, assessing. "You're strong," the figure said, "and you act with honor, but you're far from your world. This threat, it is more than simple aggression. Your arrival has disrupted the currents." T'Challa's brow furrowed slightly. "The currents of the Force," the figure replied. "It flows through all life. It binds this galaxy, and it senses your presence, unfamiliar, yet potent. You're different. I am Jedi, and these are my allies." The street erupted again with chaos. Another wave of attacks, civilian screams, energy blasts converging. T'Challa sprang into action once more, demonstrating strength and skill that even the Jedi couldn't ignore. In less than a minute, he had neutralized multiple attackers, redirected collapsing structures, and shielded hundreds of civilians. The vibranium suit glimmered faintly as it absorbed stray energy discharges, each movement calculated, deliberate, and precise. The Jedi descended to join him, their lightsabers humming into life, casting ethereal glows across the urban landscape. They moved in tandem with T'Challa, observing, assisting, and at times stepping aside to let his expertise guide the civilians to safety. There was a mutual acknowledgement. This was no ordinary warrior. The Force and vibranium technology and instinct were working in tandem. When the attackers finally retreated, the streets quieted, though tension still lingered in the air like static. The Jedi leader approached T'Challa, bowing slightly. "You have remarkable skill and clarity, but you are in a world of political and cosmic complexity far beyond a single warrior's might. The Senate, our guardians, and unseen enemies all converge here. You must learn our ways if you are to protect Alderaan fully." T'Challa straightened, eyes scanning the horizon. "I will learn," he replied, "and I will protect this world as I protect my own. But first, tell me what enemy threatens these people." The Jedi exchanged a look, a mixture of caution and concern. "We do not know fully, but they are unlike any you have faced, trained in the Force, ruthless and patient, and your arrival has only drawn their attention." A shiver ran down T'Challa's spine, not from fear but from awareness. The stakes were higher than he could have imagined. Alderaan, beautiful, vibrant, and fragile, depended on warriors and protectors who understood not just combat, but balance, philosophy, and power beyond the physical. He raised his hand, the vibranium suit humming faintly in response to his calm focus. "Then we begin," he said, "and we end this before more innocents fall." He paused, glancing at the ruins around him, the frightened civilians, and the Jedi who had acknowledged his strength. Then he turned toward the sky, where the portal had shimmered earlier. Somewhere beyond, the threat waited, and he would find it, not merely to fight, but to protect. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the Alderaanian cityscape. The streets smelled of ozone, burned metal, and the faint metallic tang of vibranium energy discharges. The Force thrummed through the air, subtle yet insistent, a reminder that the galaxy was alive, aware, and watching. And T'Challa, the Black Panther, protector from another world, had just claimed his place within it. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, smash that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. The Force protects those who support this channel. He exhaled once, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, and began walking toward the heart of the city, where Alderaan's leaders awaited. Questions of politics, strategy, and trust would come next. But for now, action was required, and he was ready. The streets of Alderaan were eerily quiet now. The immediate threat dispersed, but the tension lingering like a storm cloud over the city. T'Challa moved with deliberate precision, each step calculated to reassure the civilians and assert authority without provoking panic. He was guided less by maps and more by intuition, his Wakandan training giving him a natural sense of terrain, positioning, and crowd movement. Vibranium-enhanced senses registered subtle energy fluctuations in the environment, small arcs of residual power from the attacker's weapons, structural stress in buildings, and even the faint but distinct pull of the Force around certain individuals. Alderaan was alive in ways he could not yet fully comprehend. At the palace gates, Alderaanian guards formed a cautious line. Their uniforms were pristine, adorned with polished insignias that reflected the fading sunlight. They were wary, and rightly so. Here stood a warrior of extraordinary power, his armor unlike any they had seen, his presence commanding attention without a word. Yet T'Challa's posture, open and measured, conveyed respect as well as capability. "I am T'Challa," he said once again, bowing slightly to acknowledge their authority. "I arrived unexpectedly. I am here to protect your people from the forces that attacked your city." The captain of the guards, a tall woman with an air of composed authority, stepped forward. "Your abilities are beyond anything we have encountered. How can we trust you?" T'Challa's gaze was steady. "Trust is earned, but you have my word. I fight for the innocent. I fight to protect life. Let me prove it." Before the guard could respond, a sudden vibration in the air alerted them all. A low hum, almost imperceptible, grew steadily louder, a signal not from local machinery but from something deeper, something connected to the Force. T'Challa crouched instinctively, analyzing the flow. This was no ordinary technological alert. It carried intent, purpose, and danger. From the upper levels of the palace, figures emerged, robes flowing, lightsabers in hand, calm but vigilant expressions. Jedi. They moved with the fluidity of those who could sense the life and energy around them, eyes narrowing as they assessed the newcomer. The tallest among them, a man whose presence radiated authority and control, approached first. "You are not from this world," he said, his voice even but probing. "I can feel it in the currents of the Force, that you carry power unlike any I have sensed before." "I am T'Challa of Wakanda," he replied. "I was pulled here through a dimensional anomaly. My people, my world, remains far behind, and I have little choice but to act in defense of yours." The Jedi exchanged a glance, a mixture of surprise and consideration. They were trained to trust the Force, but anomalies like this were rare. "You are strong," the Jedi said finally, "and yet you do not understand the currents here. There are forces at play that can overwhelm even the most powerful of outsiders." T'Challa's stance remained firm, calm, yet alert. "I can adapt," he said. "I have faced gods and kings, threats beyond ordinary comprehension. I will learn your ways if it aids in protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The Jedi leader inclined his head slightly, a gesture of cautious acknowledgement. "Very well. But know this, Alderaan is under threat, not only from visible enemies. There are those who would manipulate the political currents, exploiting our strengths and weaknesses alike. You must understand both the battlefield and the broader web of influence if you hope to defend it." As T'Challa absorbed this, his senses detected movement, shadowy figures slipping through the palace grounds, subtle and precise. These were the agents responsible for the earlier attack, and they had not yet abandoned their mission. Their presence was masked by the Force in ways that even Jedi struggled to detect fully. With a fluid motion, T'Challa activated his suit's cloaking field, blending seamlessly with shadows while maintaining mobility. He moved silently toward the intruders, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to navigate the palace grounds with unmatched precision. The agents, unaware of his approach, continued their sabotage, tampering with security systems and dispersing energy charges along key structural points. T'Challa struck swiftly. A single leap brought him within reach of the closest operative, and he disarmed them in a blur of motion. Vibranium claws extended, not to kill, but to incapacitate, severing power conduits and snapping restraints with surgical efficiency. Another agent turned, sensing danger too late, and was hurled backward by a calculated strike. Each move was executed with precision, blending combat skill with technological advantage, minimizing collateral damage while neutralizing threats. The Jedi watched, impressed but cautious. Their understanding of power came from the Force, a discipline and mastery of lightsabers. T'Challa's methods were different, a combination of human ingenuity, technology, and instinct, honed over years of ruling a kingdom and defending it from multifaceted threats. It was unlike anything they had encountered, and yet effective. Once the immediate threat was contained, T'Challa addressed the Jedi directly. "There are more," he said. "This attack was coordinated, intelligent. Whoever is behind it knows your defenses and exploits gaps unseen. We must fortify not just the palace, but the city at large, and identify those orchestrating from the shadows." The Jedi later nodded, acknowledging the truth in his assessment. "We will need to work together. Your abilities and tactics complement the Force, and the people of Alderaan require both." As they began coordinating a defensive strategy, T'Challa's analytical mind raced. He considered terrain, energy flow, and the patterns of movement exhibited by the enemy. Every system, from municipal security grids to planetary patrol routes, needed assessment. His vibranium suit interfaced with available technology where possible, providing real-time data analysis and tactical projections. He marked zones of vulnerability and potential ambush points, overlaying them with predictive models based on enemy behavior and energy signatures. Meanwhile, the political stakes became apparent. Alderaan's Senate, initially skeptical and suspicious, gathered to observe this unusual alliance. Senators murmured among themselves, debating whether to trust an alien warrior and a cadre of Jedi, or to question the wisdom of their interventions. Some saw opportunity, a chance to align with a being of extraordinary power. Others feared disruption, the unpredictability of outside forces meddling in delicate affairs. T'Challa noted these dynamics, understanding that leadership extended beyond combat. Persuasion, diplomacy, and demonstration of intent were equally critical. Hours passed with measured preparation. T'Challa oversaw defensive drills, coordinated with Alderaanian engineers to reinforce vulnerable structures, and engaged with Jedi masters to understand the nature of Force-sensitive threats. Each interaction reinforced the complexity of this galaxy. Power was not only measured in physical might, but in influence, perception, and the ability to adapt swiftly to dynamic conditions. By the time night fell over Alderaan, the city was transformed from a vulnerable target into a coordinated network of defense. Patrols moved strategically, sensors monitored for energy anomalies, and rapid response units prepared to deploy where needed. T'Challa stood atop a ridge overlooking the city, the glowing lights of the palace and urban centers below reflecting off his suit. He felt the subtle tug of the Force again, confirming that his presence was not only acknowledged, but now entwined with the fate of this world. "This world is beautiful," he said softly, to no one in particular, "and fragile. It will take more than strength to protect it. It will take understanding, trust, and foresight. I must become more than a warrior here. I must become a guardian in every sense of the word." A faint hum of energy signaled that the Force-sensitive intruders were regrouping. And T'Challa's analytical mind immediately shifted into prediction mode. He began plotting potential outcomes, assigning contingencies, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. There was no room for hesitation. The lives of thousands depended on his judgment, his adaptability, and his ability to lead with both skill and integrity. Above, the stars of a foreign galaxy stretched endlessly, distant suns casting unfamiliar light across a world teetering on the edge of chaos. T'Challa's thoughts briefly flicked back to Wakanda, to the people and kingdom he had sworn to protect. The principles that guided him there, honor, duty, protection of the innocent, remained unchanged. Only the landscape had shifted. The enemies were unknown, and the rules were rewritten by an unfamiliar force. Yet the mission was the same: defend life, inspire courage, and stand unyielding against any threat. In that moment, atop the ridge with Alderaan sprawled below him and the Jedi standing nearby, T'Challa embraced a truth that defined him in every universe he had known. Power was meaningless without purpose, and purpose demanded action, and action, in this galaxy or his own, was never without consequence. The city slept fitfully beneath a fragile shield of protection, but the night carried whispers of enemies yet unseen, plotting and observing. T'Challa's sharp eyes scanned the darkness, his mind mapping every alley, every rooftop, every potential breach. The world was alive, the currents of danger and opportunity flowing through it, and he would not falter. As he descended toward the palace to join the Jedi in strategy discussions, T'Challa prepared himself for what he knew would come: the true test of his skill, his intellect, and his commitment to protecting this alien world. Alderaan's defenders were learning to trust him, but the enemy was learning as well. Every choice, every movement, every decision would ripple outward, shaping the fate of a planet that until moments ago had been a stranger to him. By dawn, the palace of Alderaan had transformed into a hub of vigilance and coordination. Guards patrolled in overlapping patterns, sensors hummed quietly in hidden alcoves, and Jedi masters moved gracefully through the halls, their senses tuned to subtle disturbances in the Force. T'Challa, standing near a central balcony overlooking the city, observed the scene with a combination of tactical scrutiny and philosophical reflection. Every detail mattered: the positioning of sentries, the timing of patrols, the natural cover provided by architecture, and even the alignment of energy conduits within the buildings. Each element could become either a strength or a vulnerability in the coming confrontation. The Jedi leader, Master Kyle, approached him with measured steps, a hand resting on the hilt of his lightsaber. "You are not only skilled in combat," Kyle said, his voice calm but probing. "You also understand strategy, placement, and anticipation. Yet even with your abilities, you must comprehend the flow of the Force. It influences all life here, subtly guiding choices and outcomes." T'Challa nodded. "I understand. In Wakanda, we rely on technology and instinct in tandem. Here, the Force adds a layer I must learn to read. I sense its undercurrents, but not its full depth." Kyle inclined his head slightly. "Then we begin with observation. There are anomalies, presences that bend energy around them, mask intent, and manipulate situations without direct action. You will encounter such beings. They are trained in ways both familiar and alien." Before T'Challa could respond, a sudden alert resonated through the palace's comm systems. A reconnaissance drone, Alderaan's latest model, reported movement at the northern perimeter, a coordinated strike team attempting to infiltrate the city's defensive grid. The readings were unusual, energy signatures that did not match any known technology, and motion patterns that suggested extraordinary agility and strength. "Show me," T'Challa said. Instantly, the vibranium suit interfaced with the drone feed, overlaying real-time tactical data, heat signatures, and energy readings. His analytical mind processed the information almost instantly. Multiple operatives, each trained in combat and cloaked in energy that dampened sensors, were moving through the terrain with precision and purpose. They were scouts, probing defenses, looking for weak points. Kale gestured toward the hollow map. "They are force-sensitive, skilled. Do not underestimate their capabilities, even as you rely on your own." T'Challa's eyes narrowed. Understood. We must adapt. He leapt into action, moving toward the northern perimeter at a pace that blurred the eye. The vibranium suit absorbed and dispersed kinetic energy from his leaps and landings, allowing him to traverse rooftops and open plazas without slowing. As he approached the intruders, he observed their methodical patterning, calculations of terrain, timing, and cover that would challenge any defender. Without hesitation, T'Challa struck. Vibranium claws extended with a metallic hiss, slicing through the first operative's energy dampeners and disabling their protective field. The sudden disruption sent a ripple through the remaining attackers, forcing them to adjust mid-strike. With fluid movements, T'Challa neutralized 2 more threats before they could execute their next maneuver, using a combination of hand-to-hand combat and kinetic strikes from his suit. Despite their training, the operatives underestimated the synergy of technology and instinct that defined T'Challa. He anticipated their movements, using not brute force alone, but calculated redirection and environmental advantage. Debris became tools, walls became launch points, and energy discharges from his suit were carefully directed to disable rather than destroy, conserving resources while maximizing effectiveness. As the skirmish concluded, one operative fled toward the city's central district, disappearing into the crowd. T'Challa's enhanced senses tracked them, noting the subtle disturbances in energy flow and force currents that marked their path. He pursued, careful not to endanger civilians, moving with the grace and precision of a predator at the peak of skill. Meanwhile, the Jedi Masters observed from above, lightsabers at the ready, their presence both reassuring and instructive. Kyle spoke to T'Challa as they moved. "You are adapting quickly, but the force-sensitive adversaries you face will anticipate your tactics. They are not merely combatants. They are manipulators, strategists. Learn their patterns, then act beyond expectation." T'Challa absorbed the advice, his mind already modeling scenarios. Every possible movement, every contingency, every deviation was considered. He understood that in this galaxy, combat extended beyond physical confrontation. It encompassed prediction, intuition, and understanding of forces invisible to the eye. The chase led them through winding streets, at market plazas and open courtyards, civilians scattered in confusion, and T'Challa instinctively guided them to safety, his presence a shield as much as his combat ability. The fugitive operative moved with unnatural speed, using the force to alter gravity subtly, manipulate objects as barriers, and create illusions to distract pursuers. Yet T'Challa's vibranium suit, combined with his enhanced reflexes, allowed him to counter every trick, every feint. Finally, the operative cornered themselves in a narrow alley. T'Challa approached with measured steps, claws retracted, voice Calm. End this. You threaten innocence. Surrender or be neutralized. The operative laughed, a sound that carried both malice and calculated defiance. You do not understand, Panther. You are a stranger here. This is not your fight. T'Challa's eyes narrowed. It becomes my fight when innocents are at risk. Stand down. A brief surge of energy preceded the operative's strike, a force-assisted lunge aimed at overwhelming him. T'Challa sidestepped with preternatural timing, absorbing the impact with the suit and redirecting kinetic energy back toward the attacker. In a single, fluid sequence, he disabled the operative, binding them with vibranium restraints that suppressed energy output without harming them. As the operative yielded, T'Challa scanned for additional threats. The northern perimeter was secure, for now, but the broader picture remained perilous. The attack had been a test, a probe to gauge defensive capabilities. The real threat would be larger, more coordinated, and more insidious. Kyle descended, placing a hand on T'Challa's shoulder. "You see what I mean," he said. "Your presence has altered the currents. You are now a variable in a larger equation. Those who orchestrated this attack will reconsider their approach, perhaps targeting strategic points or manipulating political channels. You must be prepared for both." T'Challa nodded, absorbing the weight of the statement. Protection extended beyond combat. Intelligence gathering, alliance formation, and understanding the political landscape were as vital as physical prowess. Alderaan's fate would depend not only on strength, but on foresight, adaptation, and principled leadership. Returning to the palace, T'Challa debriefed with Alderaanian engineers, military coordinators, and Jedi masters. Plans were refined, sensor networks enhanced, and patrol patterns adjusted. Every action was scrutinized, every scenario considered. As they prepared for an enemy that was methodical, intelligent, and ruthless. Through the long hours, T'Challa's mind remained vigilant. He meditated briefly atop the palace balcony, feeling the subtle ebb and flow of the Force, learning to interpret its signals without fully relying on it. The currents were unlike any he had known, yet the principles of awareness, timing, and adaptation remained consistent. By nightfall, the city's defenses were stronger, the citizens more organized, and the political leadership cautiously receptive to the presence of this stranger warrior. T'Challa had earned their tentative trust, but the journey was far from complete. The unseen enemy would test them again, and each encounter would require the full integration of technology, strategy, and understanding of the Force. As T'Challa stood overlooking Alderaan, the lights of the city twinkling beneath him, he reflected on the path ahead. The challenges were immense, the variables countless, and the stakes unimaginably high. Yet he remained resolute. Every skill, every lesson, every instinct he had honed in Wakanda was now a tool in defense of a world not his own, but no less worthy of protection. The first trials had been met and overcome. The city was safe, for now, but T'Challa knew that peace was only temporary, and vigilance would be required at every turn. Alderaan's future, and the lives of its people, depended on the continued fusion of skill, honor, and foresight that defined the Black Panther. The morning sun rose over Alderaan with a pale, serene glow, casting long shadows across the meticulously maintained streets and towering palace spires. On any ordinary day, the city would have exuded the tranquility its reputation suggested. a beacon of culture, diplomacy, and refinement in the galaxy. Today, the calm was deceptive. Though the previous night's infiltration had been thwarted, T'Challa could feel the tension lingering in the very air. The residual energy of the attackers, subtle manipulations of the Force, and the unspoken anxieties of the civilians created a dense, almost tangible atmosphere of unease. T'Challa stood at the palace balcony once more, observing the patterns of life below. Markets were slowly reopening. Patrols moved methodically along predetermined routes, and small crowds gathered near public squares, cautious but resilient. His analytical mind processed the flows and movements of the city, overlaying potential vulnerabilities with energy readings from the sweat and subtle currents of the Force. Every detail mattered. Every obstruction, every structural weakness, every civilian route could influence the outcome of a future engagement. "Your presence here has already altered the balance," Master Kale said quietly, appearing beside him. His robes rustled in the morning breeze. "The attackers did not anticipate a warrior such as you, but now they have learned, adapted, and will escalate. We cannot predict their next move with certainty, only prepare." T'Challa's eyes narrowed. "Then we anticipate, not react. We prepare for variables, create redundancies, and ensure the people's safety above all else." "Yeah, there's no room for hesitation." Kyle studied him for a long moment. "You understand the philosophy well, but remember, this is not merely combat. The Force is subtle. It can manipulate perception, influence decision-making, and obscure truth. The enemy will exploit both technology and the mind." Before T'Challa could respond, alarms echoed across the city. The northern perimeter, recently secured, registered anomalies once more. This time, the intruders were not scouting. They were executing coordinated sabotage. Power conduits feeding the city's energy grid fluctuated violently. Security systems glitched, and structural supports in public buildings began to fail. The enemy was no longer testing defenses. They were striking in earnest. T'Challa sprang into action, leaping from the balcony with precision. At landing amidst a chaotic plaza where civilians fled in panic, his suit absorbed kinetic energy from falling debris and the minor tremors induced by sabotage. He moved methodically, securing civilians, redirecting collapsing structures, and isolating dangerous energy discharges with vibranium-enhanced reflexes. Through the chaos, he observed the attackers, 4 individuals, cloaked in the subtle signature of the Force, moving with preternatural speed and coordination. Their attacks were calculated, not brute force. One manipulated gravitational fields to topple structures onto guards. Another used telekinetic pushes to scatter vehicles and obstacles, while the remaining 2 coordinated energy-based strikes designed to disable rather than destroy. T'Challa adapted instantly. Not he leveraged his suit's energy absorption and kinetic redirection to counter telekinetic manipulations, used environmental objects strategically to shield civilians and intercept attacks, and neutralized energy-based strikes with vibranium-coated limbs. His movements were fluid, a seamless blend of martial skill, tactical awareness, and technological augmentation. One operative attempted to escape by collapsing a plaza overpass. T'Challa anticipated the move, calculating the trajectory and timing with millisecond precision. He vaulted, using a nearby structure as leverage, and landed atop the collapsing overpass. With a precise strike of his vibranium claws, He cut key energy nodes, stabilizing the structure just long enough for civilians to evacuate safely. Master Kale arrived shortly after, lightsaber ignited, moving with effortless grace. Your methods are effective, but you must also consider their larger strategy, Kyle warned. They are not merely attacking. They are probing, learning, and exploiting. Every encounter changes the variables for the next. T'Challa acknowledged the point. I am aware. My priority is immediate safety. Strategic analysis follows. As the intruders retreated toward a dense urban sector, T'Challa pursued. His suit interfaced with city surveillance systems, providing predictive models of the attackers' likely routes and potential escape paths. He moved with uncanny precision, anticipating each maneuver and countering with minimal collateral impact. Civilians remained unharmed, a testament to his disciplined restraint and strategic acumen. The chase led to the city's central power hub, where the attackers intended to disrupt the energy grid, creating cascading failures that could paralyze defenses and endanger countless lives. T'Challa arrived just as the first manipulations of energy conduits triggered sparks and minor explosions. With calculated precision, he extended his vibranium claws, severing key energy lines to prevent overload, while simultaneously using his suit's kinetic redistribution to absorb errant surges. The attackers, realizing they were being outmaneuvered, regrouped. T'Challa assessed their formation, calculating angles of approach, potential environmental advantages, and each operative's unique capabilities as inferred from prior observations, using a combination of speed, tactical ingenuity, and environmental manipulation. He neutralized 2 operatives by disarming and restraining them with vibranium bindings that suppressed energy fluctuations. The remaining 2 engaged him directly, combining force-assisted strikes and energy manipulations. T'Challa's enhanced reflexes allowed him to parry telekinetic pushes, absorb energy discharges, and counter with precision strikes that incapacitated without fatality. Each movement was executed with mathematical exactitude, a perfect integration of instinct, technology, and combat philosophy. Finally, with all intruders contained or incapacitated, T'Challa turned to assess the damage. The city had sustained minor structural losses, but no civilian casualties, a remarkable testament to his skill and foresight. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. The attackers had revealed a larger network, an unseen command structure that orchestrated the strikes with strategic intent. Master Kyle approached, nodding in respect. You have not only defended the people, but demonstrated insight into the enemy's methods. Few outsiders could have adapted so swiftly. T'Challa, ever vigilant, scanned the horizon. We have bought time, but not victory. We must understand their ultimate objective and anticipate their next moves. Alderaan's survival depends on both defense and foresight. As the sun climbed higher, T'Challa convened with Alderaanian engineers, Jedi masters, and palace strategists. They analyzed the intruders' techniques, reinforced vulnerable systems, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios. T'Challa's influence was evident. His presence elevated both technological and tactical capabilities, integrating them with the force-aware insights of the Jedi. By midday, a pattern emerged. The attacks were not random. They targeted key infrastructure points with the dual goal of testing defenses and creating psychological pressure. T'Challa studied these patterns, overlaying environmental data, energy readings, and force-sensitive anomalies to develop predictive models of future strikes. The challenge was not only physical, but philosophical. Alderaan's defenders relied on structured procedures, chain-of-command discipline, and traditional energy-based security protocols. T'Challa's adaptive, instinct-driven approach introduced flexibility and improvisation. He bridged the gap between technology, instinct, and the subtle currents of the Force, creating a new paradigm for planetary defense. As evening approached, the city rested under heightened vigilance. Patrols moved methodically, sensors hummed quietly, and civilians returned to cautious routines. T'Challa, standing atop the palace balcony once more, reflected on the day's events. The intruders had been neutralized, the city protected, but the larger threat remained. He could sense it, a pattern of energy, manipulation, and intent that extended beyond Alderaan, hinting at a command structure operating from hidden locations. The attackers were merely instruments, and the true adversary awaited, calculating, observing, and planning. T'Challa's mind, ever analytical, prepared for the next phase. Defensive strategy, civilian protection, and tactical foresight would be critical. But he also recognized the need for diplomacy, alliance building, and understanding the larger political currents. The Alderaan survival depended on integration of all these elements, and he would ensure that the city, its leaders, and its people were prepared for the challenges yet to come. The sun set, casting golden light across the city's spires, the hum of energy systems and distant planetary vibrations, a constant reminder of the stakes. T'Challa's silhouette, a guardian of two worlds, one home, one adopted, stood resolute against the coming darkness. Night had settled over Alderaan, yet the city's lights burned like constellations fallen to the surface, each one a marker of life, hope, and vigilance. T'Challa patrolled the palace perimeter with deliberate steps, his suit's vibranium-enhanced optics scanning for even the faintest anomalies. Despite the day's victories, unease clung to him like a shadow, an instinct honed over years as king and protector. There was more at play than random attacks. The orchestration of strikes, the precision of the operatives, and the subtle manipulation of the Force all suggested a larger plan, one that could endanger not only the city, but the surrounding systems if left unchecked. Master Kale approached silently, a flicker of light from his activated lightsaber illuminating the folds of his robes. "The attacker's methodology has changed," he said, his voice low but urgent. "They are moving beyond mere sabotage. They seek to provoke reaction, to test alliances, and to destabilize not just Alderaan, but its political influence." T'Challa nodded. "Then we must anticipate not only forceful incursions, but manipulations of perception, trust, and decision-making. Their goal is strategic, psychological, and lethal." The palace communication network buzzed with activity. Reports poured in from outlying districts, so small energy disturbances, unexplained structural failures, and localized panic among civilians. The intruders were now operating in dispersed cells, each employing unique strategies to disrupt the city. T'Challa's suit interfaced seamlessly with the palace grid, processing the data and generating predictive overlays of potential attack vectors. Without hesitation, he moved toward the first disturbance, a residential sector where an energy conduit had begun overloading, threatening to ignite a chain reaction across multiple blocks. Civilians scrambled as sparks and electrical surges danced along walls and streets. T'Challa leapt into action, using the suit's kinetic absorbers to redirect the energy safely into the ground, preventing structural collapse. His vibranium claws cut precise channels in damaged conduits, releasing pressure and stabilizing the system. Through the chaos, a Force-sensitive operative appeared, cloaked in shadows, their intent clear: to counteract T'Challa's interventions and amplify the threat. They struck with a combination of telekinetic pushes and energy manipulation, aiming to destabilize the environment and create openings for further disruption. T'Challa responded with impeccable timing. He sidestepped a telekinetic surge, using his suit's enhanced agility to vault over collapsing debris, and redirected a concentrated energy pulse back toward the operative. The force of the counter-strike staggered the attacker, giving T'Challa the opportunity to close the distance and immobilize them with vibranium bindings. As he secured the operative, he detected subtle anomalies in the force nearby, signatures that suggested additional threats lying in wait. He moved cautiously, using a combination of stealth, predictive modeling, and instinct to navigate the environment without alarming civilians. Every movement was calculated to minimize risk while maintaining offensive capability. Master Kale arrived beside him, observing the scene with measured approval. As you continue to integrate technology, instinct, and the Force in ways few could. But beware, the enemy will adapt. Their tactics will evolve to counter your methods. T'Challa's gaze scanned the streets. Then we must evolve faster. Anticipation, adaptation, and decisiveness will define this battle. The city's political leaders convened in the palace council chamber, their discussions increasingly frantic. Senators debated the wisdom of continuing to trust an alien warrior, despite his demonstrable effectiveness. T'Challa, aware of the scrutiny, addressed the assembly with clarity and conviction. My objective is singular: the protection of your people. Every action I take prioritizes their safety. The enemy exploits hesitation and division. Unity and swift, informed response are our greatest assets. The Council, though initially skeptical, began to align with his recommendations. Emergency response protocols were updated, patrols reorganized, and communication channels enhanced. T'Challa's influence extended beyond combat. His strategic acumen, leadership, and clarity of purpose began to shift both the city's defensive posture and its political cohesion. Even as plans solidified, the intruder's pattern became evident, a coordinated attempt to fracture trust between defenders and the population. Civilians were manipulated, security forces misled, and false intelligence circulated to create confusion. T'Challa anticipated these moves, deploying teams with combined expertise in security, technical systems, and force sensing to intercept misinformation, stabilize infrastructure, and maintain morale. One particular threat emerged in the city's communications hub, a group attempting to broadcast misleading information, sowing panic and disrupting coordination. T'Challa intervened with precision, neutralizing electronic threats with vibranium tools and using environmental elements to contain potential collateral damage. The operatives, sensing they were outmaneuvered, attempted escape through subterranean passages. T'Challa, utilizing both technology and instinct, tracked their movement with predictive modeling. He anticipated exits, calculated timing, and intercepted the operatives mid-route, using restraint techniques to incapacitate them without harm. The capture reinforced his reputation among the city's defenders and instilled confidence in the populace that protection was both competent and compassionate. By late night, the city's systems were fully operational again. Structural damage had been minimized, civilian casualties were avoided, and key infrastructure was stabilized. T'Challa convened with Master Kale to assess the larger strategic picture. This was only a fraction of their capability, Kyle warned. We have neutralized immediate threats, but the adversaries are organized, intelligent, and adaptable. Their ultimate objective remains unclear. T'Challa's analytical mind processed possibilities. Coordinated strikes against multiple points simultaneously, infiltration of political structures, or manipulation of broader systems beyond the city. Then we prepare for all contingencies, he said. We fortify defenses, enhance situational awareness, and anticipate escalation. A victory requires more than strength. It demands foresight and adaptability. As he stood on the palace balcony, overlooking the illuminated city, T'Challa reflected on the lessons learned. His suit, his skills, and his intellect had proven vital. But integration with local knowledge, Force-sensitive insights, and civilian coordination had been equally critical. Defense was not singular. It was a synthesis of multiple elements, each reinforcing the other. The night was quiet, deceptively so. T'Challa sensed currents in the Force, ripples of intent, subtle manipulations, and the faint outlines of adversaries observing, analyzing, and planning. The battle for Alderaan was far from over. The intruder's sophistication indicated a larger network, perhaps a hidden command orchestrating strikes with a strategic goal beyond immediate destruction. T'Challa's resolve solidified. He had protected the city, learned its rhythms, and begun integrating the ways of the Force into his tactical philosophy. But the true challenge lay ahead, confronting the orchestrators of these attacks, understanding their motives, and preventing escalation that could imperil not just Alderaan, but the balance of power across the surrounding systems. The stars above twinkled faintly, distant suns casting light on a city resilient, yet fragile. T'Challa's silhouette, a sentinel atop the palace, symbolized both hope and vigilance. The night was long, the enemy intelligent, and the stakes immense. But he would meet them head-on, combining strength, strategy, and wisdom to safeguard the lives entrusted to his protection. The following morning, a heavy mist clung to the lower districts of Alderaan, shrouding streets and plazas in a muted gray haze. T'Challa moved silently through the urban terrain, his vibranium-enhanced senses cutting through the obscurity to detect subtle disturbances in energy, motion, and intent. The city had weathered previous attacks, yet the patterns suggested a shift, one no longer constrained to brute force or opportunistic sabotage. The intruders were becoming strategic, their operations coordinated across multiple sectors, with layers of deception, misdirection, and influence designed to fracture both the city's defenses and its morale. T'Challa paused atop a terrace, overlooking the bustling northern plaza, his keen eyes scanning the movements of civilians and guards alike. Every deviation, hesitation, A minor anomaly was catalogued and analyzed in real time by his suit. He recognized the same signs he had seen in Wakanda when observing enemy patterns, probing movements, repeated tests of security, and a methodical approach that suggested intelligence far beyond the individual attackers. Predictive modeling indicates a high probability of simultaneous strikes across 3 primary sectors, T'Challa noted, speaking into the comm system linked to both Jedi Masters and Palace security teams. We must divide resources carefully and ensure that our response is coordinated. There can be no misalignment, no delay. Master Kyle, accompanying him from a nearby rooftop, nodded. The Force indicates similar patterns. The enemy seeks to manipulate perception and timing as much as direct assault. You must remain adaptable. Their methods will evolve faster than conventional defenses. The first incident erupted near the city's central transport hub. A network of energy nodes feeding the transit system began to fluctuate violently, threatening cascading failures and immobilizing thousands of commuters. T'Challa moved swiftly, deploying the vibranium claws and kinetic absorption systems in tandem to stabilize conduits and redirect surges safely into the ground. His actions were precise, surgical, and executed without endangering civilians, though the attack demonstrated the enemy's growing sophistication. From the shadows, a new group of operatives emerged, Force-sensitive, coordinated, and seemingly attuned to his every move. They were faster, more deceptive, and capable of manipulating energy flows with greater precision than previous assailants. T'Challa's analysis was instantaneous. Each operative had a unique style. One favored telekinetic disruption of structures, another used energy manipulation offensively, while a third employed subtle illusions and force-assisted misdirection to confuse defenders. T'Challa responded with seamless integration of skill and technology, using environmental cues, predictive modeling, and reactive combat tactics. He intercepted the telekinetic strikes, neutralized energy surges, and countered illusions by triangulating sensory feedback with the suit's enhanced perception systems. Each movement was deliberate, conserving energy while maximizing defensive and offensive effectiveness. Master Kyle and a contingent of Jedi arrived to provide support, their lightsabers forming barriers against telekinetic and energy-based attacks. The synergy between T'Challa's technological acumen and the Jedi's Force mastery created a dynamic, adaptable defense. Where previous engagements had been straightforward, this confrontation required anticipation, coordination, and rapid adjustment to evolving tactics. The intruders, realizing their attacks were being countered efficiently, adapted mid-strike. One operative attempted to collapse an overhead structure onto both T'Challa and the Jedi, using telekinesis to manipulate beams and debris. T'Challa anticipated the trajectory, vaulting with calculated precision and stabilizing critical elements with vibranium-enhanced strikes, redirecting forces to minimize damage while maintaining his pursuit of the assailant. As he subdued the operative, T'Challa detected a secondary threat, a manipulation of energy conduits feeding the city's emergency services. Failure here would have disrupted communication, rescue operations, and civilian coordination. With rapid assessment, he rerouted power flows, utilized kinetic absorption to prevent overload, and disabled tampering devices planted by the intruders. Each action required split-second timing, precise judgment, and an understanding of the city's infrastructure combined with his own combat and sensory capabilities. By midday, the pattern of the intrusions became apparent. The operatives were systematically testing defensive strategies, exploiting weaknesses, and attempting to force overextension of both Jedi and city resources. T'Challa adapted accordingly, creating layered defensive networks that integrated civilian movement patterns, patrol routes, energy stabilization systems, and force-aware monitoring. Meanwhile, the political implications of the attacks began to surface. Alderaan's Senate, initially resistant to reliance on an outsider, faced mounting pressure from both the populace and the Jedi Advisory Council. T'Challa, aware of the delicate balance, engaged in diplomacy, conveying the necessity of coordinated action while demonstrating strategic competence in real time. His calm authority, combined with tangible results, gradually won over skeptical senators who began to implement defensive directives informed by his analysis. Even as the day progressed, T'Challa remained vigilant. He conducted sweeps of high-risk sectors, neutralized remaining operatives, and ensured civilian safety, all while analyzing evolving patterns in enemy behavior. The intruders were methodical and intelligent, adapting to his responses with increasing sophistication, suggesting a centralized command orchestrating the assaults. As night approached, T'Challa convened with Master Kale and Alderaanian strategists. These attacks are no longer random. They are coordinated, adaptive, and designed to manipulate both perception and reaction, he explained. Our focus must expand from immediate response to predictive countermeasures, integrating technology, force awareness, and civilian coordination into a cohesive defense network. Kale's expression was grave. The Force confirms your assessment. The enemy is calculating, not just reacting. Each engagement teaches them, reshapes their tactics, challenges our assumptions. You're their new variable, and they will seek to exploit it. T'Challa's mind, always analytical, processed contingencies, multi-vector strikes, coordinated diversions, infiltration attempts, and psychological manipulation were all possibilities. Preparing for them required not just forceful defense, but strategic foresight, rapid adaptation, and integration of disparate systems, technological, physical, and force-sensitive. As the stars illuminated the night sky, T'Challa observed the city below, noting the small but critical details, the flow of pedestrian traffic, the alignment of energy grids, and the subtle shifts in force-sensitive patterns. Each variable was catalogued, each possibility considered. Alderaan had survived another day, but the underlying threat was only growing in sophistication, intent, and reach. Resolute, T'Challa reflected on the lessons of the past engagements. Strength alone was insufficient. Adaptation, anticipation, and integration of all available resources, human, technological, and mystical, were required to safeguard the city. The attacks had revealed vulnerabilities, but also opportunities. By learning and evolving faster than the enemy, he could shift the balance, turning each confrontation into a chance to strengthen defenses and foster trust among the populace and their protectors. The night deepened, and T'Challa's vigil continued. Alderaan slept, under a fragile but resilient shield, its defenders aware that the battle was far from over. The enemy's orchestration, the hidden command structure, and the ever-present risk of escalation demanded constant awareness. For T'Challa, this was more than defense. It was an exercise in foresight, principle, and unwavering commitment to life, safety, and the preservation of order against forces that thrived on chaos. He would not falter. Alderaan's survival depended on it, and he had never known compromise when lives hung in the balance. The city, the Jedi, and the innocent citizens had placed their trust in him, and he would repay it with precision, honor, and unwavering vigilance. The tension across Alderaan thickened like an approaching storm. T'Challa could feel it, not only in the subtle ripples of the Force described by the Jedi, but in the patterns of movement, communication, and silence that settled over the city. Attacks had become less frequent, but more deliberate. That absence itself was a signal. The enemy was no longer merely testing defenses. They were preparing something decisive. From the highest spire of the palace, T'Challa studied the planet-wide sensor net he had helped recalibrate. Energy fluctuations, hyperspace micro-disturbances, and anomalous force signatures converged around Alderaan's outer orbital perimeter. Someone was assembling assets beyond the planet's immediate defensive range. Too far for routine patrols, too close to be coincidence. Master Kyle joined him. Hands folded into his sleeves. The Force is restless. There's a convergence coming. Not an attack like the others. Something ceremonial, deliberate, as though they are preparing to unveil a larger design. Then we do not wait for them to unveil it, T'Challa replied. We force them to react. For the first time since his arrival on Alderaan, T'Challa proposed an offensive operation. Not a reckless strike, but a precision maneuver. A covert reconnaissance beyond Alderaan's orbit, targeting the source of the anomalous readings. If the enemy was building a staging point, he intended to learn its composition, command structure, and vulnerabilities before it could be activated. The Jedi Council was divided. Some argued that leaving Alderaan's surface would weaken planetary defense, and others sensed that the greater threat lay beyond the horizon. Bail Organa, listening carefully, weighed both sides before turning to T'Challa. If you leave, Alderaan loses its strongest shield, Organa said calmly. But if you stay, we may never learn what is being prepared for us. T'Challa met his gaze. A shield that never moves becomes predictable. I will leave behind layered defenses, contingency protocols, and Jedi coordination structures. Alderaan will not be unguarded, but knowledge is the difference between surviving an attack and preventing one. In the end, Organa authorized a limited operation. A small Jedi-led reconnaissance vessel would investigate the orbital anomalies. T'Challa would accompany them, operating as a forward response unit if hostile contact occurred. The mission's goal was not engagement, but intelligence. As the stealth vessel slipped into space, Alderaan's blue-white curve receded into the void. T'Challa stood in the observation chamber, the stars stretching into unfamiliar constellations. His suit interfaced with the ship's sensors, filtering cosmic radiation and hyperspace wake signatures into usable tactical data. What he saw confirmed his suspicions. Energy scaffolding, artificial, modular, and deliberately concealed. They approached cautiously. The structure was not a station in the traditional sense, but a mobile command lattice, multiple smaller platforms linked by energy conduits and force-imbued signal relays. It was a war node, designed to coordinate operatives across planetary distances, amplify force-sensitive communication, and mask the true origin of commands. "This is their brain," T'Challa said quietly, "but not their fist." Before the Jedi could fully map the structure, defensive drones activated, followed by a wave of elite operatives, far more disciplined than those encountered on Alderaan's surface. These were not saboteurs, they were guardians. The stealth vessel came under fire. T'Challa moved instantly, launching himself into the void with magnetic boots and thruster bursts, landing on the nearest platform in a controlled descent. Energy fire lanced past him as he sprinted across the metallic surface, using debris and structural struts for cover. The Guardians engaged him in coordinated formations, force-assisted strikes, synchronized suppressive fire, and adaptive countermeasures marked them as veterans of countless covert wars. T'Challa adjusted in real time, absorbing energy blasts, redirecting kinetic force, and dismantling weapon systems with surgical precision. One Guardian wielded a double-bladed energy staff infused with force resonance. Their duel was brief but intense. T'Challa allowed the first flurry of attacks to land against his suit, studying rhythm and power output. Then he countered, grappling, disarming, and incapacitating the Guardian with a controlled burst of redirected kinetic force that sent them skidding across the platform, unconscious but alive. Meanwhile, the Jedi created a corridor of protection, deflecting incoming fire while downloading fragments of data from the command lattice. The structure began to power up, its conduits glowing with ominous light. Whatever this war node was meant to do, it was close to activation. T'Challa realized the truth in a flash of strategic clarity. This was not merely a command hub. It was a force amplification array, a device capable of synchronizing multiple force-sensitive operatives across vast distances, enhancing their coordination, perception, and reaction time. If fully activated, every future attack on Alderaan would become exponentially more lethal. "We cannot let this go live," he said over comms. The Jedi agreed, but destruction was not an option. The energy backlash could ripple across hyperspace lanes and destabilize nearby systems. T'Challa proposed a solution as dangerous as it was precise. Sever the array's synchronization core while isolating the power conduits, effectively blinding the network without detonating it. Under heavy fire, he sprinted toward the glowing nexus at the center of the lattice. The Guardians converged, but he moved faster, leaping, sliding, striking with fluid economy. Blaster bolts ricocheted harmlessly from his suit. Force pushes met immovable vibranium mass. At the nexus, T'Challa drove his claws into the synchronization core, rotating them with calculated torque. The array shuddered. Energy surged, then fractured into chaotic patterns. Across the lattice, conduits dimmed, and the synchronized signal collapsed into static. The war node went dark. The Guardians retreated, their coordination broken. Without their central amplification, they fought as individuals, no longer an integrated unit. The Jedi seized the opening, disengaging and retreating to the stealth vessel with the data they had extracted. T'Challa followed, launching back into space as the platform's systems failed in cascading shutdowns. As the ship leapt into hyperspace, silence filled the cabin. Alderaan's immediate threat had not been eliminated, but its unseen hand had been wounded. The enemy would adapt, but now they would do so blind, fragmented and uncertain. Master Kyle exhaled slowly. You have disrupted something vast. The ripples of this will be felt across many hidden networks. T'Challa stared at the stars. Then we have bought Alderaan more than time. We have bought it uncertainty for the enemy, and uncertainty is the one thing strategists fear most. The battle for Alderaan was evolving. No longer confined to streets and plazas, it had expanded into the shadowed architecture of galactic warfare, networks, command lattices, and force-amplified coordination beyond the sight of ordinary citizens. And T'Challa had just stepped fully into that larger war. Hyperspace released the stealth vessel into a field of scattered starlight and drifting debris, remnants of ancient battles, derelict hulls slowly tumbling in vacuum, and the cold silence of forgotten wars. The Jedi pilots kept the ship masked, its energy signature dampened as much as technology allowed. The war node had been blinded, but the enemy would not remain unaware for long. Networks that went dark tended to draw attention. T'Challa stood at the center of the small command chamber, eyes tracing the holographic projections of the extracted data. Fragmented transmission routes, hidden relay beacons, encrypted force-resonant frequencies. What they had uncovered hinted at a clandestine organization operating between major factions, feeding information, coordinating strikes, and destabilizing neutral systems. Not Sith, and not officially aligned with the Separatists or the Republic, something else. They are architects of chaos, T'Challa said quietly. They do not seek to conquer openly. They seek to ensure that no world remains stable long enough to resist them. Master Kyle inclined his head. There are whispers in the force of such groups, shadows between shadows. They thrive when larger powers are too busy fighting each other to notice the knife in their ribs. The ship turned back toward Alderaan, but the data revealed one more critical node. A relay beacon hidden within a drifting graveyard of capital ship wreckage. If left intact, it would allow the enemy to reroute their coordination network, restoring partial functionality. Destroying it would not end the threat, but it would slow their recovery by weeks. Time Alderaan desperately needed, and the Jedi pilots hesitated. The graveyard was unstable, filled with volatile fuel cells, collapsed hyperspace cores, and radiation pockets that could tear a ship apart. It was the kind of place smugglers avoided, and bounty hunters only entered when desperate. T'Challa made the call. We go in. The stealth vessel threaded through the wreckage, alarms whispering as proximity sensors flared. Twisted hulls loomed like the skeletons of extinct beasts. The relay beacon was embedded within the remains of an old separatist command ship, its power source drawing from still active reactors. This time, the enemy was ready. As T'Challa disembarked, a strike team emerged from the shadows, elite operatives reinforced with experimental tech, their armor threaded with energy-dampening fields and force-disruptive emitters. For the first wave hit him with concussive blasts that distorted his suit's energy absorption patterns. The vibranium held, but the feedback rippled through his systems, briefly staggering him. So this was adaptation. T'Challa shifted tactics, abandoning direct frontal engagement. He moved into the wreckage's labyrinthine corridors, using zero-gravity micro-thrusters to reposition, striking from unexpected angles. He dismantled emitters, overloaded enemy power packs, and turned the environment into a weapon, detonating dormant fuel cells to create controlled shockwaves that scattered his attackers. The Jedi attempted to assist, but the narrow corridors limited lightsaber arcs and deflection angles. This fight belonged to T'Challa's domain, close quarters, kinetic, improvisational combat. He reached the relay beacon and began severing its power couplings. That was when the enemy commander revealed herself, a Force-sensitive operative whose presence pressed against T'Challa's mind like a cold hand. She wielded no lightsaber. Instead, she used the Force to bend debris into orbiting projectiles, launching them with sniper precision. T'Challa took the hits on his suit, absorbing and redirecting momentum, but the sustained assault began to push his systems toward overload. The Force, he realized, was being used not to overpower him, but to disrupt his rhythm, anticipating movement, collapsing his tactical options. He adapted. Instead of reacting to the Force-driven attacks, he baited them. He allowed one piece of debris to strike him at an angle that carried its momentum into the relay beacon's housing. So the impact destabilized the power core. The commander lunged forward to stabilize it, and in that moment of focus, T'Challa closed the distance, striking with precision and restraint, incapacitating her without lethal force. The relay beacon went critical. T'Challa triggered a controlled collapse, isolating the power surge and venting it into space. The resulting burst of light briefly illuminated the entire graveyard, a silent star in the void. Extraction was chaotic. The stealth vessel barely cleared the debris field as secondary explosions rippled through the wreckage. But the relay beacon was gone. The enemy's backup network lay in ruin. When they finally returned to Alderaan, the atmosphere had shifted. Reports indicated that coordinated attacks had ceased entirely. Then the enemy was reorganizing, scrambling to rebuild what had been dismantled. For the first time since T'Challa's arrival, Alderaan experienced a fragile lull. But the Jedi sensed it, too. The enemy was no longer merely probing. They were enraged. And rage in the galaxy often drew the attention of darker powers. T'Challa looked out over Alderaan's tranquil skies, knowing the calm was temporary. He had wounded an invisible enemy. Now they would seek to make the wound bleed. The first sign that the enemy had shifted from shadow war to open escalation came not with an explosion, but with silence. Alderaan's long-range listening arrays, normally alive with the faint static of hyperspace wakes and civilian traffic, fell quiet across multiple sectors. Merchant convoys dropped out of scheduled communication windows. Diplomatic couriers failed to arrive. Even the usual criminal underworld chatter that filtered through covert channels vanished as if someone had drawn a curtain across the galaxy. To seasoned strategists, silence was louder than any alarm. T'Challa stood with Bail Organa and Master Kyle in the Alderaanian command chamber as technicians struggled to re-establish contact with the missing traffic. Holographic projections of hyperspace routes pulsed red. Entire lanes flagged as compromised. Whatever network he had damaged, the enemy had responded not by retreating, but by hardening their grip on the arteries of interstellar movement. "They are not attacking Alderaan directly," Organa said, his voice tight. "They are isolating us, cutting us off from allies, trade, and information." T'Challa nodded. Siege doctrine, not of the city, but of the world. Reports filtered in of ships being boarded in deep space by unidentified forces. Crews were disarmed, communications wiped, and vessels released, emptied of cargo, stripped of navigation data. No massacres, no grand displays of terror, just systematic erasure of connectivity. The message was subtle, but unmistakable. Alderaan could be choked into surrender without a single turbo laser firing on its surface. And the Jedi felt another layer beneath it, a tremor in the force that carried coordinated intent. The enemy's fractured network was reorganizing into something more brutal, less elegant, but far more aggressive. They had lost finesse. Now they were trading it for force. T'Challa proposed a counterstroke that drew sharp breaths from the counselors and military advisors alike. If they are severing hyperspace lanes, then they must be staging from fixed interdiction points. Gravity wells, artificial mass shadows. You do not block hyperspace without anchoring reality itself. Master Kale's eyes narrowed. Interdictors, rare technology, dangerous to deploy at scale. Dangerous, T'Challa agreed, but effective and predictable. The plan was simple in concept and brutal in execution. Identify the primary interdiction hub constricting Alderaan's sector and dismantle it. Not sabotage, not blinding. Destroy it completely. The risk was immense. Interdiction platforms were typically protected by layered fleets, automated defenses, and elite boarding contingents. Worse, destabilizing gravity wells in active hyperspace corridors could cause cascading accidents across neighboring routes. The operation would have to be precise down to the second. Organa hesitated. If this goes wrong, we won't just lose a battle. We could lose neutral systems caught in the backlash. T'Challa met his gaze. If we do nothing, Alderaan becomes a planet under quiet occupation. No allies, no trade, no voice. That is conquest by starvation. I will not allow that. Authorization was granted. The interdiction hub lay within a dense nebula, its ionized clouds masking sensor signatures and scattering targeting solutions. As Alderaan's defense fleet approached alongside a small contingent of Jedi strike craft, the nebula lit with hostile fire. The enemy had fortified the hub into a fortress. Capital ships arrayed in layered orbits, automated turbo-laser platforms embedded in the station's superstructure, and fighter screens that moved with machine-like coordination. This was no longer covert warfare. This was a battle for the lifelines of a sector. T'Challa launched from the lead corvette as the first volleys crossed space. Starfighter cannons stitched light across the void. Explosions bloomed silently against shields. He cut through the chaos on a direct vector toward the station's central mass shadow generator. If he could reach it, he could plant a vibranium-seeded charge capable of collapsing the gravity well inwards, neutralizing the interdiction field without triggering a hyperspace shockwave. Enemy fighters swarmed him, their targeting algorithms struggling to track a single armored figure moving at relativistic bursts between capital ships. Blaster fire ricocheted from his suit as he used the enemy's own hulls as cover, skimming along armored plating, leaping between debris fields, and using micro-thrusters to alter vectors unpredictably. Boarding torpedoes slammed into Alderaanian cruisers. Jedi interceptors tangled with elite enemy pilots in spiraling dogfights. The nebula turned into a graveyard of burning wreckage and drifting bodies. T'Challa reached the station's outer hull and cut his way inside. The interior was a cathedral of machinery, reactor cores humming with unnatural gravity harmonics, conduits glowing with compressed mass energy, corridors lined with disciplined troops prepared to die to keep the hub operational. They tried to stop him. He did not slow. Every movement was efficiency honed by war. Disarm, incapacitate, advance. Force-assisted strikes met immovable resistance. Energy blades glanced off vibranium claws. He moved through the station like a pressure wave, not out of rage, but necessity. Each second the gravity well remained active meant more ships trapped in hyperspace limbo, more systems isolated. At the heart of the hub, the mass shadow generator pulsed, a sphere of distorted space that bent light and gravity alike. The enemy commander awaited him there, flanked by force-sensitive enforcers. The air itself felt heavier, the generator's influence warping perception and balance. "This galaxy does not belong to you," the commander said. "You are an aberration." T'Challa's voice was calm. "So are you. The difference is that I choose to protect those who cannot defend themselves." The clash was violent and immediate. Force waves slammed into him, driving him back against the generator's containment field. His suit strained under gravitational shear. For the first time since his arrival, he felt the limits of adaptation, the galaxy itself pushing against him with alien laws of physics and power. He anchored himself, driving vibranium claws into the deck plating, using the generator's own gravity to stabilize his stance. Then he advanced, step by step, absorbing punishment, closing distance, dismantling his opponents with relentless precision. The commander struck at his mind with the Force, attempting to overwhelm him with disorientation. T'Challa endured, focusing on breath, purpose, and the faces of Alderaanian civilians he had sworn to protect. He reached the generator's core and embedded the charge. Extraction was impossible. The enemy had sealed the chamber. The only way out was through the gravity well itself, a maneuver that could tear a body apart at the molecular level. T'Challa made a choice. He triggered the charge and hurled himself toward the collapsing field, riding the implosion's edge as the mass shadow folded inward. Pain lanced through every system. His suit absorbed, redirected, burned. The world became white noise and pressure. Then, release. The interdiction hub died. Across the sector, hyperspace lanes snapped back into alignment. Trapped ships spilled back into real space, battered but free. The nebula's artificial gravity distortions faded, leaving only wreckage and silence. Alderaan's fleet, bloodied but standing, withdrew. When recovery teams found T'Challa drifting at the edge of the battlefield, his suit was scorched, systems flickering, but his heartbeat was steady. He had crossed a line between strategic intervention and sacrificial gambit. The enemy's siege had been broken, but the cost was written across the nebula in the cold light of shattered hulls. The medbay lights of Alderaan's palace complex burned soft and steady, a stark contrast to the violent starlight that had consumed the nebula hours earlier. T'Challa lay within a lattice of diagnostic fields as Alderaanian physicians and Jedi healers worked in careful coordination. His suit had fused in places, its vibranium lattice scorched by gravitational shear and exotic radiation. The technology had held, but just barely. For the first time since his arrival in this galaxy, T'Challa had come within a breath of true defeat. Not at the hands of a single foe, but from the universe itself, pressing back against a foreign presence that refused to bend. Master Kale stood at the foot of the medical platform. You survived the collapse of a mass shadow generator. The Force struggles to make sense of that. T'Challa's eyes opened slowly. Then perhaps the Force is learning that not all defenders wear robes. The chamber allowed itself a faint exhale of relief. But the war had not ended with the destruction of the interdiction hub. Intelligence reports flooded in over the following days, painting a picture of a galaxy reacting to a sudden, destabilizing shift. Trade routes reopened. Isolated systems sent frantic diplomatic signals, and in the shadows, the fractured remnants of the clandestine network began to cannibalize themselves, cells turning on each other as command hierarchies collapsed. The enemy had lost its strategic spine, but wounded predators did not become harmless. They became desperate. Bail Organa convened a planetary council that included Alderaan's defense leaders, Jedi representatives, and neutral system observers who had risked travel now that hyperspace lanes were restored. The chamber buzzed with voices, fear, gratitude, and calculation intermingling in equal measure. Alderaan is no longer invisible, one senator said quietly. We are a symbol now, a world that resisted a siege not with fleets alone, but with him. Eyes turned toward T'Challa. The weight of that attention sat heavy. In Wakanda, he had been king among his people. Here, he had become something else, a variable in galactic equations, a figure whose presence altered strategies, alliances, and threat assessments. T'Challa addressed the council without pomp. Do not mistake survival for victory. The network that sought to isolate Alderaan is wounded, not destroyed. They will adapt. Others will learn from their failure. If Alderaan becomes complacent, this galaxy will teach it the cost of stillness. Master Kyle supported him. The Jedi can assist in training Alderaan's defenses, but we will not turn this world into a fortress that mirrors the tyranny it resists. Balance must be maintained. Here lay the final moral crossroads. With the threat exposed, Alderaan could choose to militarize, to become a hardened bastion bristling with weapons, alliances, and deterrence doctrines. Or it could remain true to its philosophy. Diplomacy first, strength in reserve, resistance without domination. The choice would define not only Alderaan's future, but how the galaxy remembered this moment. T'Challa spoke last. In my world, isolation was survival. In this galaxy, isolation is death. Alderaan's strength is not in becoming what it fears, but in proving that protection and principle can coexist. To build defenses, forge alliances, but do not let fear become your architect. The council agreed, some reluctantly, some with visible relief. Alderaan would not become a militarized citadel. Instead, it would invest in layered defenses, intelligence-sharing pacts with neutral systems, and limited Jedi coordination, all while maintaining its identity as a diplomatic heart of the galaxy. In the days that followed, Alderaan breathed again. Trade ships returned. Civilian traffic filled the skies. The quiet terror of isolation gave way to cautious optimism. But the galaxy had changed. Whispers spread of a foreign warrior who had shattered an interdiction hub alone. Factions took note. Some saw a potential ally. Others marked T'Challa as a threat to be studied, countered, or one day eliminated. T'Challa stood once more on the palace spire, watching Alderaan's horizon glow with twin suns. This galaxy was not his home. It never would be. Yet its struggles were now entwined with his own sense of duty. He had not come seeking to reshape the Force, the Republic, or the balance of power, but by choosing to stand when a world was quietly being strangled, he had altered the trajectory of a sector. Whether that change would echo as legend or provoke darker currents to rise in response, only time and the Force would decide. Alderaan survived not because the galaxy rallied in time, but because a stranger refused to accept quiet extinction as a form of peace. T'Challa's arrival did not rewrite the great wars of Jedi and Sith, Republic, and Shadow networks. Instead, it carved a new truth into the fabric of the galaxy, that protection does not always come from ancient orders or sprawling empires, but sometimes from a single will choosing to stand where others turn away. The clandestine network that sought to suffocate Alderaan would rebuild in fragments, more cautious, more paranoid, its leaders haunted by the knowledge that even the most carefully hidden architectures of control could be torn open by an unpredictable force. Alderaan in turn would walk a narrow path, stronger, more vigilant, yet determined not to lose the compassion that made it worth defending. And T'Challa? He remained a figure between worlds, neither fully of this galaxy nor apart from it, a reminder that even in a universe bound by the Force, destiny can be challenged by those who carry their own code of honor across the stars. The galaxy did not return to equilibrium after Alderaan's siege was broken. It simply found a new, uneasy rhythm, one shaped by the absence of the Shadow Network's guiding hand and the presence of something far more unsettling, proof that the hidden architectures of control could be torn apart by a single, unpredictable variable. In the weeks that followed the collapse of the interdiction hub, fragments of intelligence drifted through hyperspace lanes like debris from a shattered fleet. Republic analysts whispered of power vacuums in neutral sectors. Smugglers reported syndicate leaders disappearing, their networks collapsing overnight as rival factions moved to claim abandoned routes. Bounty hunters found contracts suddenly voided, payment chains severed at the source. For the Shadow Network's retreat had not ended chaos, it had redistributed it. On Coruscant, within chambers layered in marble and secrecy, senators argued over how to respond. Some demanded the Republic extend its reach, to occupy the destabilized regions and impose order. Others warned that doing so would only provoke resistance and overextension. The Jedi Council, sensing deeper currents, cautioned against rushing into territories laced with unseen Force disturbances. Something in the wake of the network's collapse was wrong. Not dark in the familiar Sith sense, but hollow, like a wound in the Force that had not yet begun to bleed. And in the underbelly of the galaxy, the surviving remnants of the network gathered. They met in silence, aboard a derelict carrier, drifting beyond mapped hyperspace routes. The ship's interior was stripped of insignia, its power routed through scavenged reactors that barely held stable output. The survivors were fewer now, commanders without fleets, tacticians without networks, Force sensitives whose once synchronized perception had been reduced to lonely, unreliable whispers. The commander who had faced T'Challa at the relay beacon survived. Her armor was scorched, her connection to the network's Force amplification shattered. She spoke to the others not with fury, but with clarity born of humiliation. "We built a system that depended on perfection," she said, "on invisible architecture and synchronized will. One variable, one outsider, collapsed years of preparation. We will not rebuild the same way. Plans formed in low voices. No grand network. No single spine to break. And cells would operate independently, bound not by infrastructure, but by ideology. Where the old network had been elegant, the new one would be feral. Where the old sought to control flows of information, the new would weaponize chaos directly. Assassinations, planetary destabilization, engineered conflicts between rival factions. If the galaxy could not be quietly strangled, it would be bled openly. Their eyes turned toward Alderaan in holographic projection, not as a primary target, but as a symbol to be undermined. Symbols, they knew, were more dangerous than fortresses. On Alderaan itself, T'Challa felt the shift in subtler ways. The planet's skies were once again filled with civilian traffic. Markets reopened. Diplomatic envoys walked the palace corridors with cautious relief in their posture. Yet beneath the surface, calm. The Alderaan had changed. Defensive drills became routine. Intelligence briefings were no longer rare interruptions but woven into daily governance. The world had learned that peace required vigilance, not paranoia, but readiness. T'Challa spent long hours with Alderaan's strategists and with Master Kale, refining layered defense doctrines that did not rely on singular points of failure. Distributed sensor nets, redundant command structures, civilian evacuation protocols designed not to provoke fear, but to normalize preparedness. The planet would not become a fortress, but it would never again be naive. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below Alderaan's horizon, T'Challa stood alone on the palace balcony. The air carried the scent of flowering terraces and distant rain, so unlike the metallic tang of Wakanda's cities, but yet soothing in its own way. He activated a small salvaged interface within his suit, a remnant of the dimensional rupture that had brought him here. Wakandan scientists would have called it a miracle. In this galaxy, it was an anomaly layered atop anomalies. The readings were faint, unstable, but unmistakable. The possibility of a way home, not immediate, not safe, but real. Master Kyle approached quietly. "You are not bound to this place," the Jedi said. "The Force does not compel you to remain." T'Challa did not look away from the horizon. "In my world, a king's duty is to his people. Here, I am no king, yet people bled while I stood among them. Does duty end at the border of a universe?" Kyle considered this. The Jedi believe duty is service without attachment. But you are not Jedi. Perhaps your duty is to the choices you make, and not the worlds you are born to. The question of departure lingered unresolved. T'Challa knew that if he left now, Alderaan would endure. It had allies, it had defenses, it had learned. But the galaxy beyond Alderaan remained in flux, its shadow wars merely changing shape. His presence had altered trajectories. Removing himself would alter them again, perhaps in ways less predictable. In the deep shadows between stars, the feral remnants of the network began their first moves. A trade dispute engineered into open conflict. A planetary governor assassinated to destabilize a neutral system. The galaxy's great factions would see these as isolated incidents. T'Challa, having seen the architecture of hidden war, recognized the pattern beginning to form. The board was being reset. And for the first time since his arrival, T'Challa understood that this galaxy did not merely need defenders in moments of crisis. It needed watchers in the quiet spaces between storms.